let's get to our member-specific segment. Alfred, take me deep. I want to go deep.
We want to go on a dive. So this all came out of the fact that I love game night. I loved physical IRL game night, where between you and Maddie, my head was always spinning with the variety and the audacity of game space. Like every week you would bring out some classic or some new current that had like barely been released or not yet released. And I just got a chance to play so much. I just feel so spoiled in this way of playing Cursory and the Surface game, right? Because every week it was a new one, and there was a great teach going on from yourself, Maddie, or Jen, or whomever, Paul and Trey both. Everybody doing a great job of elucidating what's happening. You kind of slowly build up a lexicon. You kind of understand like this is this kind of game, and it'll be this kind of game or that kind. And so you get these commonalities, but always the intricacies of these heavier Euros means that you're just scratching the surface. So about midway through the game, you're like, oh, I think I understand how this works. And by the end of the game, you're like, maybe, and then I never saw it again, oftentimes. These games come out once and one and done. And I have to say that video games were always a slightly different experience where, maybe at first I don't have the dexterity or I don't quite understand it, but you get those reps. And I really like that kind of deep experience of feeling aptitude. Let's just put it there. Just the scratching the surface of like knowing the game. And BGA has been that recently. Right? Well, it's beyond accomplishment. It's like there is a lot of especially for the games that have lasted the test of time. There's reasons for that. Yeah. And for me, I would like it piqued my interest that like, oh, I see something here. I don't quite get it. I don't quite understand it. But there's something here, and there's something that people are really doing, and especially when you're on BGA and you're playing. You see these like just the rankings, these numbers, and so you see someone who's like fifth in the world or fifth on BGA, I should say, and they're playing a different game. They have these insights, and so I have been ever since the Russian Railroads review from however many weeks ago. I have been daily playing at least one game of Russian Railroads, sometimes more. Right, and it's a perfect game for this because you can kind of finish in like 30 minutes, 45 minutes. If you're playing a 4-player, maybe it's like up to 2 hours, but you can do it really quick as a 2-player, especially when you're playing against someone good. And it has been revealing itself to me. And so I want to ask you a question, Tom. What are the games that you feel like you have gotten more than 100 reps in on?
Let's see. Games that I've gotten more than 100 reps on? Listen. I think I'm probably fairly expert on Avalon. I think Tichu, I would put myself into, I could go into a Tichu tournament and feel like I got a really good shot at it. I probably haven't had 100 plays of Diplomacy, but I've probably had a lot more plays of Diplomacy than the vast majority of people, and probably pretty good there. Twilight Struggle is a game that for sure I've gotten more than 100 plays in on. So
these are some great heavy games that you have depth on, and that depth has not only affected your game there, but elsewhere, because you can see how the kind of vast understanding you're able to bring to a game of deception or a game of perfect placement, and where that can kind of help bridge your broader knowledge. And so that depth, that kind of core nugget of information, not everyone has access to. And I just would love and encourage everyone to kind of do the work to create that possibility for yourself. And part of that is that, to me at least, is that there is an inner game, and not to take anything away from Dimitri's kind of more nuanced idea of fun. But
please take away from it.
Let's just say that that there is a game that is elegant and kind of perfectly poised, where you don't make mistakes. You don't feel like you're making mistakes. You don't feel like you're on the verge of mistakes. You feel like everything is happening as it should. Mm-hmm. And that comes from deep depth, right? That comes from that deep dive. Yeah. Where there is no longer this kind of just like, oh, am I in the right place at the right time? You are playing the game as you intended. You are manifesting your archetype, and sometimes that actually allows you to, rather than being like getting lost in the game, it allows you to really enjoy the theme. because then you can kind of strip away the kind of worry about you being you like a turn too late where you're like, oh, I made the wrong turn, I made the wrong move. You start to see the actual balances that are at play. You start to see the kind of deeper, more meaningful choices to be made. And you can really then, like, so again, sourcing back to Russian Railroads, I've now gotten over 150 games in or something. BGA gives you this great tracking, these great analytics that are kind of constantly flowing in as long as you're willing to pony up a little bit of cash. And I'm starting to see the successful strategies. And this is partially because of the analytics and partially because of my memory. Like, it's kind of becoming these reps where these kind of muscle memory of like, I know this move at this time is important. I don't have to be nervous about that anymore. I've like unlocked that. And I've not only seen other people do it, but I've done it enough myself to know that feeling of when the game is actually clicking together, when the cryptic is starting to spell out the word, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the tyranny of time is the issue, right? Because so many of these games, you can go really, really deep. You can play these games hundreds of times, and then they become a little bit like chess, where all of a sudden you did this in your first move, and you're doing the Albin counter gambit, and I will use the Baltic defense to right.
Well, you mentioned this with diplomacy before. There's like classic moves based on what country you start in and what move you're going to make and what to expect.
Yeah, very much so. In that game, more than any, it's your opening moves there are only so many, and the one that you do is, oh wow, we have to explain this to people their first time, but wow, that is a huge anti Turkey move, and the player's like, I'm nowhere near Turkey. What are you talking about? And I'm like, no, but
the butterfly effect,
because you did this, so and so has to do this, and then all of a sudden, Turkey Turkey is in trouble.
It starts to sing, basically.
Yeah,
there is, and just like with Twilight Struggle, there's some, like, for instance, there's some very understood card combinations, things to play early, things to play late, and it totally changes the game to become a little bit tighter, sometimes a little less wild and unrestrained, but it becomes maybe a kind of game to which you can start to enjoy it in a way that the visceralness starts to come out. And again, I think it leaves room for more theme to start to play a part. And then also, these designers who continually have hits, I feel like sometimes it is easy to get stuck in like the new and the now.
Yeah.
But there's something about just really understanding why these people are monuments, why they create monuments and are themselves monumental. That comes out of repeat play.
Now, why? Given this, why have you not embraced the depth of Avalon? You have played Avalon with us hundreds of times. Where did this?
It's twofold, and I think, and this is one area where Dimitri did have it correct. I don't like lying games.
Yeah.
It's a literally like a muscle in my face I don't like using. There's that, but then also, and this is no slight to our game group, I adore all of you, but there is a certain set in our ways thing. Like I am always suspicious of you, Tom, because for whatever reason I have been deceived by you, however many times, and it becomes like that's a game we have a lot of reps on, but in the kind of negative a little bit for me, because I just can't forget the times that you were bad, even though you're pleading with me that you're a good guy and that you know something and that you are Percival. It turns out in the end you were Percival, and that you had to cover for Merlin, and all these perfect, like you were playing great, but I have a hard time leaving the previous game behind.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And that's part of deep games, right? Part of deep games is being able to do that, being able to
recognize patterns.
Yes.
You start seeing the game play out. And then, so we have this, like, I can tell at turn 2 of Avalon, like Dimitri's going to do his math thing and kind of, regale us with some story, and he's a bad guy. And Paul's going to do something a little bit like out of bounds that he always does, a little out of bounds, and he's a bad guy. And you're going to say something to try to sway whoever the newbie is at the table, and you're a bad guy. So we suddenly have 7 bad Avalon players, whereas there should already be 5 good people and 2 baddies.
Right.
And and so it throws the math off for me a little bit. But I will say is that deep dive we did helped undo some of that.
Right.
The deep dive that was on the podcast before helped me really see some other fresh thoughts on it, and not just kind of, see your faces lying to me again. I'm a hurt person.
So Trey, I would say, does go deep, right? He went deep in Agricola for sure. He understands that game at a level to which it dissuades the rest of us from playing.
I mean, I hear you, but and I haven't really had the chance to play with Trey before. But I will say that Trey, as a game designer, I think, and I don't think we should ever bring up anyone's name. And I don't mean just to be specifically picking on Dimitri, but I don't think we ever should say exactly what someone does or does not like. But I will say Trey is a game designer, and I think has insights into game space that only people at that level, like yourself and Maddie and Trey, who have really devoted a lot of serious thought and time to game, can obtain.
Yeah.
And I think indeed, like, those things about depth can help spill out elsewhere. You get deep on one game, and I think you have insights elsewhere. Thusly, and maybe sometimes that's negative in the sense that you can be preoccupied with a mechanism in one game being a mechanic in another, or just using those words too freely, like I always do. But anyways, the games don't always relate, and even if they have similar, like similar uses of something, like Glory to Rome is very different than La Granja.
Yeah,
they play differently. There's different timings, but I do think by knowing that feel and getting, if we had enough reps in La Granja, I bet you would be better Glory to Rome players. I mean, this maybe it's just common sense.
Yeah.
But just the fact that we are so addicted to the new, and we need these 8x8s. We need these like reasons to get a game on the board, not just our wild enthusiasm that we're trying to learn it.
Yeah. I would say that I think probably, even though I haven't got hundreds of plays in, there are a bunch of splatter games that I've probably played more than most people and really have a deeper understanding of. Now, that said, if I was to play people that have played it hundreds of times, they would be teaching me brand new things about it. And so I think we're all, it's a spectrum, and we're all at a certain place on it. Here's my question for you. Name me 3 games right now that you wish you could go a lot deeper on. What would your dream list be for games that you want to go deep on? You know what? Take a moment to think about it. I'm going to start, because there are games that Friedrich is a game that I've brought up a lot. We've never reviewed it. It's tough to get to the table. There is a convention in Germany where all they play is Friedrich. Just that, the entire convention is for one game.
Incredible.
Does that tell you that this is a deep game? Yes, this is a deep game. This is a fascinating game. I would love to get reps on that game and start to see some of the different ways that it evolves. I think that would be fascinating. I love Agricola. I would love to get to Trey's level, and Trey will probably tell you that that there are levels far beyond what he can play. That when he goes to conventions, that there are people that have a deeper understanding than he does. But for our group, he's always had a very he always knew this card is overpowered, and this and this is the combination, and he had a very, very deep understanding of that game.
I mean, when your face is on a card, right, it forces you to know a little bit more about what's going on.
I think that's very, very fair. So those are 2 of mine. I would also say that I would love to play Democker to the degree I probably have played it more than almost any non-German person, but it is one of those games that the more I play it, the more I realize, there's so much here. There's so much. There's so many different. There are so many opening situations, because in the opening of that game, you are selecting from from column A and column B. What are your starting advantages, and where are you starting? There are so many variations on that I've never even tried. And what would that yield? So, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my list is fairly simple, because all the games that were my number ones on our top 50 were games I don't have enough reps on because they're not implemented. Lorenzo, with the extension, especially the expansion,
yep,
and the Gallerist.
Yeah,
actually anything that is Gallerist or Gallerist related, like the depth of those games is staggering, and the ways to which I have seen people do well. I adore the number of different kind of strategies that seem to result in simple, like I'm going to start here, totally changes your game. And I been so lucky that we like that game as a game group. So it comes to the table, but I adore it, and I played it maybe 10 times. Not near, and always spaced out. Like if you ask me right now, point blank, what are the rules, and I would kind of falter. And then finally, Twilight Struggle, which is just a little too long and a little too deep. It's been always intimidating to me, and especially with Imperial Struggle out now, it's like there's more to that universe that's being spelled out, that even though I know they're not related, there's just enough there between them that I wouldn't mind going back to the roots and really knowing why the #1 game on BGA. Isn't it still, or has it now been supplanted by like Wingspan or something similar?
#1 on BGA. I'm not sure on BGA.
Or not BGA, BGG. Sorry, BGG.
Oh, okay. I'm pretty sure it's still Gloomhaven.
Oh, Gloomhaven. Okay, I don't know why I don't count that as a game, but either way, but Twilight Struggle as that game is way up there, and I don't feel like I've done it, and I don't know if I ever could get enough reps on that. I don't know if I ever could. I mean, Lorenzo and the Gallerist, sure. If they put them on BGA, I'd be playing them all the time.
Right. Well, that's the problem, though. The problem is that the super deep games that you want to get a lot of reps on are hard to play a lot because they're super deep games.
I will. This is where I noticed a tendency in myself, and I think Trey has pointed this out in me quite often now, especially if you go to the Discord. I like a speed game.
Yeah.
I something about the clock. Even when I used to play chess way back in the day, I thrilled at the kind of the guillotine coming down, the short period of time to which to make a lot of decisions. And this maybe plays into a totally different topic at some other future point, but the fast game, the speed game is super interesting to me. And so I'd like to think I make good decisions, but certainly if I take too long, if my AP starts to show up too hard, it changes my game enjoyment.
Interesting. So that makes me think, okay, what are the deep games that play fast?
I mean, Russian Railroads. I can ace that thing in 12 minutes.
Interesting.
But I don't think it's necessarily the most quality game. I just like it, but it's kind of arbitrary way. Like we talked about that in the previous episode. But if indeed, if you can think of any, or if our listeners can think of any like really meaningful games where there's rich decision space but are short, I'd be really curious, because I would love, and especially on BGA, if that trifecta can be met, I would be super in.
I don't know if Santiago is even online. I brought it up a few times, but Santiago is a game that does not take very long, and it is a brutal bidding, spatial puzzle knife fight of a game that I think could be played at a much higher level than we're capable of reaching yet, because we don't have enough reps. But it is an astonishing game. I think it's probably the quickest playing of my very top games, not counting games like Tichu and things like that.
So let's all make a pact. Let's make a pact that we will try to get some depth and just be better. Be all better for it. And then so when we all meet again in person, be it strangers listening to the pod or indeed our like beloved game group, that we can just like bring it to the table and show up and not regret our decisions like 2 rounds later and have like a big old redo.
I would love to. I don't think I can make that pact at the moment. I mean, the problem is that I got to do an ep every week, so I'm sort of in a place where I have to do that. And right now, life is kicking me in the butt a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm having a hard time getting any plays in, the required plays. So I can't do it right this second. But man, I wish I could make that pact. I'm dying to get that pact. I think it's a great idea. And to our listeners, yeah, do that, guys. Go deep. I think that Alfred's dead on right. There is, and maybe just pick one. Just pick one game that you say, in addition to whatever else you play, you're just going to make a point to go on BGA or whatever and pick a game. Russian Railroads is a really good choice, because it does. There's a lot to it for a game that can play so quickly, and just start getting those reps and see what that experience is of knowing a game so intimately that each move you can see the permutations coming out from it. It's a pretty amazing thing, right?
Yeah.
Alfred, thank you so much. That's really awesome. Absolutely love it.
Thank you.
Hey, if you enjoyed that video, you very well might enjoy the other videos you now see being suggested to you on screen. Also, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could like, share, or subscribe to our Game Brain channel. Thanks so much.